Hey guys, welcome to another ride in the Strugglebus, where every wheel is an empty triangle. On today's Strugglebus Basics video, we are going to be going over the difference between territory and influence, as well as going over the value and purpose for stones that are played on different lines. So let's just jump into what this video is about. And we're going to start with some conceptual examples. So let's start with that now. So before we get into why stones on certain lines are a little better than others, we've just got some examples here. And so this is the first one. You can see that white has all fourth line stones and black has all fifth line stones. And I bet if I asked you who was winning this game, you would correctly identify that white is winning this game. And when we go to score estimator, it's going to show that white is ahead by 111 points, which is quite a bit. So this kind of shows us, this shows us a few things. One, we already knew that the corners and sides were more important than the center. But in terms of efficiency, this is showing us that fourth line stones are more efficient than fifth line stones. If we look at another example where we go a little bit in the other direction, we now have white on the outside on the second line and black on the inside of the third line. If I asked you who was winning this game, I think you would also correctly guess that black was winning this game. And if we go to score estimator, you will see that black is up by 97 points. So this shows us that third line stones are a little more efficient than second line stones. So if we go to our final example where we have black on the outside with third line stones and white on the inside with fourth line stones, I asked you who's winning this game. It's a little tougher to tell. If you've paid attention to the other videos, your intuition's probably going to say that black is winning because black has the sides and the corners and that they are more important than the center of the board. But it's pretty close here. In this situation, when we turn on score estimator, it's saying that black is up by 15 points, but it's worth noting a few things, and really just one main thing, and that is black has 8 extra stones on this board. While the other examples that was true, the score differentials were so much more different that the differential in number of stones that were being played really didn't matter too much. But here it does. Black's up by 15 points, but black has 8 more stones on the board. So this kind of shows us that third and fourth line stones are pretty even. And that's going to be the big topic of this Strugglebus Basics video. And so I just wanted to go over this before we jumped into anything further. So now let's go over to a blank board and we will start talking about some concepts and go over some more tangible examples. Okay, so here we are with our blank board, and this is where we're going to start going into some examples. And the first thing I want to go over, since it is one of the big components of this lesson, is discussing the difference between territory and influence. If you're a newer player, you might not be familiar with these terms. So let's just give an example. Okay, so black is going to play a 4/4 stone, and then white's going to choose to jump in immediately, and that's fine. White can choose to do this. Black blocks, white extends, and let's say black extends a little more, and then white takes this jump. This is a pretty simple variation. I think we can all agree we've probably seen something like this in our game, or if we've watched other games, we've certainly seen variations similar to this, or if you've played a bunch, you are probably already familiar with this. But anyway, so looking at this exchange, this is going to, basically show us the difference between territory and influence. So looking at what white got out of this exchange, it's clear that white has a reasonably strong group, and white has also secured some amount of points here, whether it be 6 or 8 or 4. The time will tell how many points this will actually turn into, but that's what white got out of this, is white got some territory, and then you can move a little bit along the right side here. But in terms of concepts, territory is a pretty easy concept to understand. White is surrounding territory, therefore white is getting territory. Influence, on the other hand, is a little more difficult to understand. But so in this situation, when we look at what black got out of this, black has these 3 stones that are nice and strong, and they are facing the outside. So what exactly are these stones doing? Well, these stones, they have strength that are facing the rest of the board. So these stones are going to influence a lot of what happens in the rest of this game, which is why we call this influence. It isn't going to directly turn into territory, But what this is going to do is it's going to affect any nearby fight. It's going to influence those fights. It's also going to influence certain things, like if there are variations that are done on the other side of the board that turn into a ladder. So for an example showing what I'm talking about with this, let's have black play a 4/4 stone and white approach and black back off. There's this very common attachment joseki that white can play here, where the typical response is black playing here and then white plays this hane. Now, looking at this, it looks like black can Atari here and then go and capture this stone. But normally, there's a counterplay that white can do where white plays this, black descends, and now white can ladder this stone. And so this is actually not a great outcome for black because white gets some really good strength outside. The issue is with these 3 stones here, this doesn't actually work for white because if we follow the ladder all the way out, you see that these stones end up being a ladder breaker. So even something as small as having these 3 stones on the outside affects what variations can happen on the opposite corner. And so that really shows, what influence can do for the rest of the board. So now there are some variations that white can't do that white might want to do because these stones will act as a ladder breaker. Or maybe now there are variations that black can do that black wanted to do because we have these stones here. So again, these stones are influencing the rest of the board. And the more influence you have, the more you're going to be able to control the rest of the game. And so that's the difference between these two. That's what we're trying to balance. Is it's important to get territory because at the end of the game, whoever has more territory wins, but it's also important to control the rest of the game. And so we have to balance those two things. So for the remainder of the video, when I speak to territory, I'm obviously speaking to the points that we've actively surrounded. And when I speak to influence, I'm talking about this strength that radiates across the board. And before we go too much further with this, I want to acknowledge that newer players typically struggle to use influence well or to use it correctly. And so in a situation like this, it's easy to see exactly what white got out of this. It's easy to see the points that white has captured, but it's tough to envision what these points are, what black stones are going to turn into in terms of actual points at the end of the game. And the influence, it's really like potential. It's potential to do something, but if you don't actualize that potential, it doesn't turn into anything. And so if we use influence incorrectly, it can end up being that white got more out of this exchange than black did. But if you know how to use influence, then it is considered even. And there are situations where if your opponent inaccurately plays near your influence, you can take advantage of that. So it's definitely a double-edged sword there. So now that I've talked a little bit about what territory is and what influence is, we can get to the real meat and potatoes of this video, which is going over playing stones on various lines, first, second, third, fourth, or fifth line, what those stones mean and what we're trying to do with them. So let's go back to our blank board where we are doing our examples here, and we're going to discuss what these various stones mean. So let's start with third line stones because they are probably the easiest ones to figure out what we're doing with. When we choose to play a third line stone, such as the 3/4 point, we are saying that we are valuing territory. Okay, third line stones are nice and efficient, and what they are efficient at is securing territory. And so if that is your goal, if you want to get more territory than influence at the beginning of the game, then you should put higher priority into playing third line stones. And that is why we'll often see an opening where black opens like this, and then white plays here, and then maybe black plays here, white plays here, and then black will play another third line stone. And so black has 2 third line stones here, and what black is saying with this is, I really care about this territory. And so I am willing to play 2 third line stones to get this territory. Okay, and that's true whenever we have a choice between playing a third or fourth line stone. If we play that third line stone, we are saying we want territory out of this. So another example would be if our opponent plays a 4/4 stone and we approach and then they kick, and we extend, and they come back. The difference between playing Q10 and R10 is going to be, do you care more about territory or influence? If you care about influence, you want to play Q10. If you care more about territory, then you want to play that third line stone and play R10. There is no right or wrong choice here. This is mostly comes down to preference, though later on in the game, some decisions will be more impactful than others when you're determining if you should be taking influence or territory. Another example from a common joseki that we see frequently is when black plays a 3-4 and white approaches high. We typically see black attaching to the stone. White will play the hane. Black will pull back to connect. White will connect. Black will extend. And now white has the choice. Does white play K16 or K17? And this is a similar decision. If you care more about influence, you're going to be playing K16. If you care more about territory, you're going to be playing K17. In this situation, K16 is more common because we already have 2 fourth line stones here. And so this will get us a little more influence because we also already have those 2 fourth line stones. But again, it is perfectly reasonable to play this third line stone. If you are more interested in playing a territorial approach to a game, then you're likely going to be making the decision to be playing more third line stones than fourth line stones. So let's back it up to the beginning again. And now let's take a look at fourth line stones, because another common opening move that we see is the 4-4 stones, probably the most common one. So fourth line stones, which you've probably already guessed, they tend more towards influence than they do territory, but they're also more flexible because this can turn into territory. It's just that more often than not, it's going to turn into influence because your opponent could immediately play a 3-3 stone. And while there are variations where you can then still retain the corner, typically in this situation, we see black do something like this, where black is more than happy to take the influence that white is giving him here. While white is securing points, black is getting influence. And again, what is this influence going to turn into? Only time will tell as the game progresses. What is this territory going to turn into? I think it's pretty clear already what white has gotten in terms of territory, and they really aren't going to grow that much more. But again, if you are playing a 4-4 stone, you have to be okay with this result, because when you played the 4-4 stone, that was you saying, I don't mind if I get influence. In fact, I might want influence. And so if you look at this outcome and don't like what this looks like for black, then maybe you should put a little more thought into if you should be playing 4-4 stones or not. Though, as I said, 4-4 stones can also still turn into territory, because another common variation that we see again is if white approaches here, black can kick, and we expect something like this, where we are looking to potentially get the corner here, though the 3-3 can still be played. Or we're also used to black just backing off, white sliding in, black blocking, and then white extending. And so looking at this variation, this has turned into territory for black, even though black started with a fourth line stone. You'll notice that white has 2 third line stones and a second line stone, so that is white saying, I care about territory here. So black had a 4-4 stone. It was flexible, could have turned into influence, could have turned into territory. Here, it turned into territory. But there are other times, again, when the decision between playing a third or fourth line stone will dictate if you're looking for influence or territory. So going back to the same examples that we used before, here, if black kicks, and we're gonna revert this back to white, white extends, and say this black slides back here. Again, white has the choice between playing Q10 and R10. And so here we're going to this time choose to play our Q10, which is the fourth line stone. So this is white saying, I care about influence here. And it's important to note when you are playing this is not you getting these 9 points, because we do not play fourth line stones to get territory this early in the game. You are playing this to get influence. So if you are playing this thinking these points are yours, I've got some bad news for you. That's not how it works. So just be aware that when you're playing this, again, perfectly fine move. This is the move that I typically play in this situation. Just be aware that this is, with it being a fourth line stone, this is looking to get more of influence than it is for territory. So you'll notice I've been focusing a lot on third and fourth line stones. And the reason for that is these stones are the most efficient at what they do. If you are looking to get territory, third line stones are the most efficient stones to do that. Second line stones get you territory too, but they don't do it as well as third line stones. And similarly, fifth line stones get you influence, but not as well as fourth line stones. And so at the beginning of the game, when we're really focusing on efficiency, we want to be focusing on those third and fourth line stones. That is why my second Strugglebus basic rule is to make sure to balance your third and fourth line stones. And hidden in there is the fact that you should be playing third and fourth line stones, right? Because those are the ones that are very efficient. And we do want to have a healthy balance of both territory and influence. So that's why we want to generally balance those third and fourth line stones. And so again, this just really focuses on third and fourth line stones. But it's important to understand what stones on all the lines mean. So we already have, the groundwork kind of laid out for what third and fourth line stones do. So what about first line stones and second line stones and fifth line stones? Well, let's start with second line stones because they're probably the next easiest to understand. So another Strugglebus basic rule that I have is, unless it's needed for life or death, to avoid playing early first and second line groups. And again, that's because they just aren't that efficient at doing what they're trying to do. So we want to be focusing on those third and fourth line stones. But there are plenty of variations. I've shown one already where second line stones do get played. So there is a purpose to them. So again, we will use this example where white approaches, black backs away, and then white slides in with a second line move. And you would think, well, this is kind of early for a second. And we're really looking at, third and fourth line moves. But the purpose of this move, is twofold. We want to make sure that black doesn't get too large of a corner. And also we want some good stability for our stones. And so that's why we're playing this. So when black plays here and white slides back, this group is very solid now. And one of the main reasons that it's solid is it has this nice anchor on the second line. So it's going to be very difficult to attack this group. This group isn't going to get a lot of points, but it's not going to be a liability for white because it's nice and strong now. And that is because of this second line move. So second line moves, they typically, more securely set like the border and boundaries of your groups and your territories. Until you play a second line move, it'll be pretty easy to reduce your territories from this, coming from the sides of them. So in this case, the top or the bottom. But because they're not terribly efficient at really, securing that much territory, they typically don't get played until middle game or later. You're not going to see too many of them in the beginning of the game. Though again, there are plenty of Josekis that use many second line stones, but that's typically done to get strength so that you can then play your third and fourth line stones without being attacked when you play them. Because really at the beginning, that's what we're looking for. We want to play those third and fourth line stones, and sometimes we need second line stones to facilitate that. So moving on from that, we can look at first line moves. And so then what is the purpose of first line moves? So in this situation, let's say that black then responds here to black, plays a second line. This is a little too early for a second line move of this case of this example, because black was already strong. Black also can't be attacked here. And so we said before that second line moves were really there to strengthen your group, to make sure it couldn't be attacked, to make sure it couldn't get undercut. In this case, black already had all those criteria met. So black did not need another second line move here. So this would be considered a small move. But anyway, so what does it mean when white plays this? Now plays this first line move. Well, one of the things it means here is white is a newer player, because this is just not a good move. First line moves really should not be considered at all at the beginning of the game. They are almost always purely for end game. So first line moves really need to be avoided early in the game. If I had to break up the different lines to tiers, I would have third and fourth line stones at the top tier, I would then have second and fifth line stones at the next tier, and then I would have first line moves at like the sadness tier, like actual tears, because it's really sad when you play them. I mean, don't cry when you play them, but you know your soul probably does. They really should be avoided because they are small. They are really just to be meant for endgame to fully to fully close off the border and try to minimize your opponents and maximize yours. But we're really only talking like a handful of points when we play these. So they really should be avoided, which is why we have the rule that says to avoid early first and second line moves. So we've gone over third line stones and fourth line stones and second line stones and first line stones. So let's go into the last one I want to discuss, which is fifth line stones. So fifth line stones, they don't get played too frequently, but typically when they are played, it is to surround a group and to get influence. So in this situation, it's possible that white played this and black knows better than to respond to this move and could play a move like this or a move like this, both of these being fifth line moves. In this situation, they're really just played to stop your opponent's group from extending into the center while you get that influence as well. And really that's it. These moves are, they're very central moves. They're based on influence, but because they're so focused on the center, typically we don't see them too frequently in the beginning of the game because we want to be focusing on the corners and the sides before we go into the center. But we do see fifth line stones from time to time, and that's typically what they're doing is just trying to block the opponent from getting their own influence. But just like with second line moves, this comes at a cost because it's not as efficient as fourth line stones. So in this example, even if white just wanted to do something simple like this, this is good influence for black, but white's getting fourth line territory now, which is more efficient than third line territory, right? Because we're getting 3 points per stone instead of 2. Black's getting the same amount of influence. Black would rather have this influence on the fourth line than the fifth line. So that's why I kind of consider second line stones and fifth line stones to be on that second tier. They're kind of similar in strength in that regard. And again, we need to avoid those first line moves. So the final thing that I want to go over with this concept is understanding that when you have a decision between playing a third and fourth line stone, that decision matters in terms of what you're going to use that stone for. I'm a big proponent of not putting too much thought into opening theory during a game. As long as you're playing moves that make sense, I think it's going to be fine. So coming back to our blank board example, when black takes the 4/4 and we approach, and black kicks, we extend, black comes back, and we have this choice here. Don't stress about which of these is correct. Don't approach this and go, oh, do I want territory or do I want influence? I don't know. Either decision is fine. Just be aware that if you're playing this, that your plan now is I have some influence here. And you want to be consistent with that. You don't want to then change your mind as things progress. You want to be consistent with those decisions you make. So this is an example that I really enjoy showing because it can show the pitfalls of playing a move like this and then not being consistent with it. There's a slight trick play that black can play here, which is playing R12. Later in the game, this is a perfectly fine move for black to play. Early in the game, not so much. There's really only one response to this move, and if you want to pause and think about it, if you're not familiar with this follow-up to this variation, what do you think the response would be to this, and why do you think that would be the response? And so really the only response to this is to play on top. And the reason for that is we already have a fourth line stone here. That tells me we wanted influence here. And so nothing has changed. I still want influence. I said I want influence, so I'm going to take my influence to block this black stone from breaking up my influence. Then black is going to play here, which threatens to connect to the stone. And we will block that connection. And now if we go here, black loses this stone. And so black plays here to protect. And so now this is the real question of where does white play now? Well, if you've been paying attention, you've heard me say that we have decided that we wanted influence here and we want to be consistent with that. We're not focused on territory. So we already have our influence. These 3 stones are doing a really great job of giving us influence. We don't need anything else for this. So white's correct move here is to Tanuki. Granted, I assume the other corners would be taken at this point, but white should Tanuki here. It's okay if black plays this to capture the stone, because then we can just cover it here, and look, we still have great influence. And this now threatens to take these 2 stones, and so if black wants to play something like this to capture this, that's great. We got our influence, and we got it in Sente, and we got to play away again. So we can go play another big move. And you might look at this and go, but this isn't good. Look how many points black got from this. But remember, when we played Q10 all the way back here, we were saying we cared about the influence. Also, it is worth noting at the end of this variation that yes, black has gotten a lot of points here, but white has gotten to Tanuki 2 times, which is many more points than black has gotten here. So in this example, when we played Q10 and saying we want influence, then you need to be consistent with that and not worry about giving up the points. In this situation, if white plays here, this is a big failure on white's part because white secured not too many points here. White now has these points secured, as where black just secured pretty much all of this corner. A lot of points, and did so in Sente. That's really where the trick comes in, is we cannot let black get a corner that large in Sente and just get this few points. And granted, we still have the influence, right? We can't ignore the fact that we also still were successful in maintaining our influence. But why did we play this stone just to get 4 points when we were focused on getting influence? And so this is so that's the other big takeaway from this is once you have made a decision locally, be consistent with that decision. If you try to change your mind later, it's going to be tougher. Going back, so let's say that instead of this, white chose to play here. This is saying, I want territory. So later in the game, black plays here. We probably do not want to play this move because this is going to break up our territory. We're going to miss out on points here. We're potentially going to get separated. So in this situation, even though it is small in terms of the amount of points we're going to get, we should be being consistent in taking our territory. If this isn't what you wanted and you are unhappy with the influence that black is getting here, well, then a few moves ago, you should have played Q10 instead. And this is the more common move that you're going to see, is playing these 4th line stones. And the main reason for that is if this turns into points, it's obviously more efficient than 3rd line stones, right? 4th line territory is worth more than 3rd line territory. So you're typically going to see these because by nature we're a little bit greedy. We're hoping to get more than we should out of it. So you will see often in situations like this, 4th line stones played with the hopes that they're going to get many more points. But it's easier to break up those points because it's easy to undercut 4th line stones and 5th line stones for that matter. So a couple other things before we finish up this video. So you'll notice again, 3rd and 4th line stones. That's your bread and butter for beginning of the game. A lot of the variations that you're familiar with, you're going to notice that a lot of it is jockeying for a position to get those 3rd and 4th line stones. Frequently, the variations are going to be one player getting 3rd line stones, the other person getting 4th line stones, and that's that push and pull of one player getting territory while the other player is getting influence. And again, influence is difficult to use, and so that comes with time. It comes with practice, but at first, it is really hard to use, and so many newer players are a little hesitant to play the variations where they get influence because it's just that much harder to use. But I promise, as you play more and understand how to use influence a little bit more, it will become better and it will become more even. And you might even get to a point like me where I actually prefer to take influence because I like what it does in terms of controlling fights. So if you're the type of player who likes fighting, take a look at getting influence because then you can force more fights, and you're going to have all these stones that are going to influence that fight, and it will go a little bit better for you. So that's where we're going to leave this one, though there is a part 2 to this video, and in that video it's going to be me going over a game that I played recently where there were a lot of interesting decisions as to if I should be playing third or fourth line stones. And again, I mentioned that I enjoy playing with influence, so I'm frequently playing the fourth line stones, and this game is no exception. And then we can kind of see how I used that influence to end up winning the game. So anyway, thank you guys for coming out for another ride in the Strugglebus, where every wheel is an empty triangle. Have a good one, guys.